Good afternoon, QChurch, and welcome to our house. This afternoon, we are here as a community to continue our quest for faith, love, and life. Now, next Sunday, we will be celebrating the freedom that can be found from the ghosts in our minds at our Haunted Halloween special. Doors will open at 3:30 p.m. as usual for refreshments before the ghost-busting fun kicks off at 4 p.m. Now, we have a delicious after-party planned from 5:30 with a pumpkin carving competition, so bring your carved pumpkins along with you to be displayed in the back hall. Please be aware that if you're not staying for the after party next week, then it's probably best not to use the church car park next Sunday. This will be a fantastic event for all the family, so please take some flyers home with you today so you can invite people along this week. There'll be no Wednesday night IQ meeting this week, as we'll be using the time to prepare for next Sunday. So why not jump onto our media page at qyork.co.uk and scroll down to IQ Talks, where you can catch up on the latest series in which we've explored what it means to be going beyond Jesus. Also, don't forget that this year our Christmas at Our House celebration will be on Sunday the 22nd of December, and then we'll take a break for Christmas, so there'll be no service this year on Sunday the 29th of December. If you're a guest with us this afternoon, then welcome to Q. It's lovely to have you here. If you'd like to stay in touch with what's going on here at Q Church, then you can subscribe to our free text messages by simply texting your full name to 07852 622 101. There are also Welcome to Our House cards on the pew in front of you, which are there for you to fill in and hand to a steward. Everything that we do here at Q can only happen because of generous people like you. And the easiest way to support Q and all we're doing here together as a community is to hit the donate button at qyork.co.uk. If you'd like to make a cash or a cheque donation today, then you can use the black and white envelopes in front of you, and we'll take a collection later on this afternoon. Now, speaking of donations, the lovely Eunice Craven is on the hunt for towels for the homeless. So if you have surplus towels or would like to help the homeless in this way, then please see Eunice. Thanks. After the final song this afternoon, there will be drinks and snacks served in the foyer, and we'll have half an hour to relax and chat over a cuppa, whilst our 5 to 11-year-olds have 30 minutes of fun and games with our Life Zone team. But first, last week at Our House, we looked at how our unwillingness to get out of our comfort zone can lead to having regrets. And today we're going to explore this process further, because the things we've done or not done that we might regret can lead us to feeling guilt or shame. And how each of us engage with these feelings of guilt and shame will quite simply determine our state of mind, our way of being, and how we think about ourselves. So this afternoon, we are setting off on a quest for freedom from guilt and shame.
Glory to God in the highest. Glory to God in the highest. Good evening, everybody. And before we start tonight, we want to congratulate Charlie, who ran the marathon again. So I believe it was 2 hours, 46 minutes, 47 seconds, and you beat your own personal best by 5 minutes. Yay! Huge congratulations. Honestly, we were just saying I couldn't do it, so all credit to you. Well done, amazing. Now, last week we learned about how if we allow discomfort in life to grow us rather than leave us stuck, we can actually move towards harmony, towards that place of having more than one string to our fiddle, of being able to accommodate different things in our life because we're willing to sometimes go and make the more difficult choice. And we've actually learned last week how we can default to these autopilot settings. And for some of you, that might be guilt and shame. And so the first thing I want to say tonight is let's not feel guilt and shame about feeling guilt and shame, because it's not supposed to be a down night. It's actually supposed to be a night where we're going to solve some stuff. And we've also heard last week and in recent weeks how a lot of these things link to our identity, to what we believe about ourselves. And I would actually go so far as to say that I think you could argue that most of our life boils down to what we believe about ourselves, what we believe about other people, and what we believe about whatever is beyond ourselves and other people, some kind of spirituality or faith. Even if you would say you don't have any faith in an external God of any kind, or a God within, or a good consciousness, if you don't have any, that also shapes what you believe about yourself and others and your role to play in humanity. So if you take each of those three things, I think it's quite important that every week we do a journey where we look at what do I believe about myself, what do I believe about you, and what do I believe about the divine and the role spirituality plays in my life? Because that's actually going to be defining a lot of your moments. And so it's always worth doing, in my opinion. Now, I'm increasingly of the view that we don't like to be faced with Chris said this to me once, I think, and then it repeats in my head all the time. None of us like to be challenged with a version of ourselves that goes against what we want to believe about ourselves. We like to think we've got ourselves sussed. But I think enlightenment is about living with the lights on. That we say, whatever I turn out to be when I put the lights on, I'm going to go from there. And I'm going to start from there, and I'm going to unpack it from there. And a lot of why we want to live with the lights off and in shadow is because of feelings of regret that have led to guilt, that have led to shame, and those parts of us that we then don't want to be seen. But unless we put the lights on, they remain in shadow, and that shadow tends to be like a cloud over our heads, figuratively, and sometimes in reality, it can be quite a dark place. And I just wanted to remind you before we continue the night of a few weeks ago, we saw that volcano, Mount St. Helens, where it utterly devastated the landscape. And what everybody said was, oh, it's going to take years. It's never going to recover. That's it now. It's utterly destroyed. And in our lifetime, we're never going to see something replace that beauty that once was. And yet within a year, life had found a way. And so as we go through today, perhaps you've got some areas where it feels like ashes in your life, of things that didn't go to plan, of things you feel guilt or shame about. But please, as we go through the night, dare to believe that something could grow in those ashes, just like it did in that volcano. And it doesn't have to take years. You can actually start to see life grow again. So a lot of the things tonight are going to speak for themselves. You're going to hear lots of different voices saying lots of different things. And let's believe life overcomes in all ways tonight, and leave a little bit better off than we arrived. Thank you.
I like that. So there's a phrase that we have learned over the last, I remember it from maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I would definitely remember Chris saying it at some point, maybe somebody else mentioned it as well. But it was this: as you thinketh, so you stinketh. As you thinketh, so you stinketh. And I think it's really true. The things that we think about ourselves and other people totally changes what comes off of us. And the kind of reality that we create around us, a lot of it's created by what we think about ourselves. So there were two things really clearly put across in that video about guilt and shame. So guilt was defined as I made a mistake. So it was saying like, for example, I was saying to Chris earlier, if I'm playing the keyboard up here, sometimes if I fluff it off or something goes wrong, I can be there for like 5 minutes obsessing over like, that was just so awful and I'm just completely crap and why can't I play this properly, and frustrated, and you get consumed in all of the stuff that you've done wrong. In the meantime, you're missing all of the potential opportunities that you could have to play things right. Hands up if you can relate to that, where you make a mistake in a situation and then you spend so long obsessing over the thing that you're missing actually all the opportunities that are in front of you. And I think it's because we get caught up in shame. We get caught up in, this seems to define everything I am, rather than that's a thing that just happens and that I just did. There's 2 words that I thought might be helpful with this. I feel like guilt potentially is all about our potential. I think it can actually show you you're way more than what you just did. Like what you just did is maybe showing you there's room for improvement here. Actually, you could be a way better friend than that. You could be a way better piano player than that. It could be, do you know what I mean? It's showing you the potential that you can have, whereas I think shame just says, problem, you're a problem, this is a problem, and it just puts this big obstacle in front of you. Okay, I want to wrap up now because I want to introduce a clip from The Lion King. This is original, not remake. But the original one, there's a clip, and there's 2 voices that Simba, the little lion, hears. And we're going to show 2 separate clips. So one is the voice of Scar, his evil baddie uncle. And that voice is just preaching shame at him. It's showing him all the problems of the things that have just happened. And later on, we'll see a clip of Rafiki, and Rafiki brings a different voice in that actually shows him his potential for change. So I hope tonight we can grasp hold of the potential for maybe how guilt can actually help us grow as people and how we can actually be free from shame. So enjoy this.
I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up. Am I more than just the sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. Whoa, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I'm falling short, when I don't belong. Oh, you say I am yours, and I believe. Oh, I believe what you say of me. Yes, I believe. The only thing that matters now is everything you think of me. In you I find my worth, in you I find my identity. Whoa, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I'm falling short, when I don't belong. You say I am yours, and I believe. Oh, I believe what you say of me. Yes, I believe. Taking all I have and now I'm laying it at your feet. You have every failure, God, and you'll have Well, I can honestly say that every one of those descriptive words in that last song, I can be honest, I say I've been there, I've fallen short, I've not felt that I've belonged, I've not felt deserving of love, I've been all of those things, and like what was said in that first clip with Brené Brown, the self-talk has got to change. And some people will say, oh yeah, but it's not as easy as that. Well, it might be hard, but if it's the only solution, then we better figure it out. And so I wanted to do Q Without You today because I wanted basically just to be vulnerable and say if anybody knows what it is to feel incredibly guilty. And, you know, I liked it when Danny was talking about, you know, when he fluffs up on the piano. And, you know, we all know those sort of fluff-ups. But have you ever done a real big fluff-up, you know, really bad fall? They're ones that, I am not kidding you. How do you get out of a hole so deep that's that deep? Now, we've all done things that we feel guilty about. For instance, come on, mums, how many of you suffer mum guilt? How many of you feel that you should have done more for your kids or been there more for your kids? Now, you see, we all struggle with that, but you know what's lovely? Because a lot of us feel the same, there's a camaraderie about it, and it sort of gets us off the hook. Are you with me? But there are some things, and I was thinking today, I mean, who remembers Jamie? Do you remember Jamie? Gorgeous Jamie. He felt so guilty about something that he had done, and yes, he'd done it, he was guilty, but he could never, ever release himself from that. So unfortunately, he became the very thing that he didn't want to be, and basically died twice because he never recovered. And you know, it was so sad that that was his story. So there are some things that we do that the guilt is so unmanageable that it can become very, very destructive in our lives. Now, it can be healthy, and I think it is good to say of some things, that will never, ever happen again in my life. I think that's good. But you know what? Sometimes it's just really hard, you know, to release yourself from those sort of things. Now, it's said that no one ever dies by being bitten by a snake. Now, you'd say, that's not true. But actually, the bite itself is not the problem. It's the venom within the snake that will kill you. And that's really the story of guilt, because you won't die from the event most of the time, but the poison that's released into your being is what tends to take us into that very horrible place. Now, I want to describe, anybody who's heard of a writer called Edgar Allan Poe. He described guilt like this, and I'm giving you it this way because I think it helps to put it in, you know, these sort of words. Listen to this. The worrisome knowledge of the damage we have done and the anguish we have inflicted on others, as well as the way we've failed ourselves, annoying distress, not annoying, gnawing, you know, G-N-A-W, annoying, distress arising from a sense of guilt for past wrongs that have short-changed our future. That's what we're talking about, a guilt that is so incredibly bad. Now, as I said, I've been there, and no one's underestimating its power. And I hold my hands up to everything that's been said in the clips already. The one, especially with Simba, was run away, run away. Oh yeah, I wanted to run away like you wouldn't believe, because it felt that was the best solution. I wanted to run away. I hold up my hands to everything that happens with guilt. But the reason why I wanted to do this tonight is that there can be freedom. But you have to be willing, like we said at the beginning, to do the work. And like what Brené Brown said, you have to be willing to, first of all, own it. Because otherwise, it's a killer and you will not survive it. So let me tell you just what I tried to do, and it took a while, but this is what I tried to do. First, I owned my mistake, and like Brené Brown said, she said, speak it out. Because if you don't speak it out, if you don't call it what it is, we can't actually accurately assess where my own guilt lies. You see, there's many of us who carries guilt for everybody else. That's not a good thing. Because if you're carrying guilt for everybody else, how do you just deal with the bit that's yours? Because you can deal with your bit if you see it and look at it and say, you can make an accurate assessment of your responsibility in the event. And it's not a virtue to take on everybody else's. It's only correct. So look at it, call it what it is, and take responsibility for that. Then do your best to make amends and learn from it. See what you need to do to put some stuff right. So there's a clip that's coming up at the end, and we'll maybe say this in the next bit because I thought it was the other way around. But what happens is you have to take control of the situation. And I won't talk about that now. Talk about it later. Sorry, jumping on. So I refuse to be in an adversarial relationship with myself because there was no healing for me or for anyone else in that. So I had to recognize who I'd hurt. I have to recognize the responsibility I had also for me staying in a guilty state, because staying as I was in that adversarial relationship with myself wasn't fixing anything for anybody. I also understood that there were people out there who weren't going to release me from my mistake. They were always going to define me by my mistake, and I wasn't going to join them. And I decided, nope, they can define me by that mistake if they want for the rest of my life, but I'm not going to join, I'm not going to participate. Because if I participate in that, all I will do is stay in the pit of despair that I am. And so those things, and I think I've missed a whole bunch of stuff out, but they're the things that I had to do in order to get myself back to health, because I realized that staying where I was not going to help anybody else. And it's okay to think, well, people won't think I'm really sorry if I'm okay, or if I'm healthy, or if I'm enjoying life. And you have to say, no, you make amends, you do your best, and then you get on and live again. Because we don't want the poison to spread further into things, our friends and our loved ones, etc., etc. Anyway, just to finish this last little bit, there's a story that I find really helpful. And I've told it before here, but I'll tell you it again because I think it helps in the context of this dealing with guilt. And I would say, it's a bit weird because the thing that they feel guilty about, we would say, hang on a minute, why does he feel guilty about this? Well, you see, because when all's said and done, we feel guilty over what our own moral code is. Remember, it's your own moral code. And that's why we can upset people when I'm not upset about one thing and they're really upset about it. Why? Because it's their moral code and it might not be mine. Have you got it? So we've got to be very careful how we impose those moral codes. Anyway, the story goes that two monks are traveling together and they come to a river which had a strong current. And as they were preparing to cross, they saw a young lady, a very beautiful lady, attempting to cross, but was finding it tough with the current. So the two monks glanced at one another because they had taken vows. See, this is their moral code, that they're not going to touch a woman. But then without a word, the older monk picked up the woman, carried her across the river, placed her gently on the other side, and carried on his journey. The younger monk couldn't believe what had just happened. After rejoining his companion, he was speechless, and an hour passed without a word between them. 2 more hours passed, then 3. Finally, the younger monk could contain himself any longer, and he blurted out, "As monks, we are not permitted to touch a woman. How could you then carry her on your shoulders?" The older monk looked at him and he replied, "Brother, I set her down on the other side of the river. Why are you still carrying her?" Whoa! Isn't that a cracking story? Some of you want to put some of these stories in a little folder that you can look at when you need some encouragement. Because you see, the thing is, in 2008, what my story goes back to 2003, but in about 2008, I finally put the thing down, but other people just kept on carrying it. So there are people who still look at me and they're still carrying my problem. But I put it down a long time ago. And this is what I want to encourage all of you, please. This is what Q is about. We want you to live free. We want no backpacks full of guilt and full of shame. So just to finish, hang on, just 1 second. Where are we? So I changed my self-talk, and this is a wonderful thought. I forgave myself for not knowing what I didn't know before I learnt it. Now, that's a wonderful saying of Maya Angelou says it, and it's so fantastic because what she says is she had to go back to be the person she was when the thing happened and recognize I'm not that same person anymore and find the compassion to forgive. And I hope what I've said to you tonight encourages you, because there are no unredeemable mistakes in anybody's life. If you want to keep carrying them, fair enough, but you don't have to. Isn't that awesome? Thank you.
It's the opposite of how you
That's encouraging, isn't it? I like the bit, that's what I was referring to when I was speaking before about, so what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to take your stick. Take your stick. And some of you have been beaten by a stick of guilt, and the best thing to do is to look up and say, that stick's mine, I'm going to take it, and I'm going to not run away, but run to. Awesome. And I hope this hasn't been too much of a downer, because it really needs to be an upper. We want everybody free. We want everybody to be released. So let me just wrap up by just giving you a few thoughts, and it's this. Well, guilt starts very early. Starts very early in childhood, because we soon learn what it feels like to be disapproved of, and we work hard to live within those social and family boundaries that are set. But we can get to a place where what we feel is no longer guilt. Like we read at the beginning, it's not that I made a mistake, but I am a mistake. And this is when our very identity is compromised, because guilt has become shame. Is there any wonder we have so many cases of mental health struggles? Because we all feel we're supposed to have it all together, and no one wants to display their mistakes. We hide them because we think if people know, then they won't think I'm okay, and they'll have a judgment over me, and they will, like a stick, hold it over my head, or I'll hold it over my own head, whatever. It's so sad. I mean, it's been said in a lot of the clips tonight, but psychologists say that the most common expression of guilt is anxiety and depression, because it's somehow a thing that people feel they deserve it. Do something bad, well then I deserve to feel this way, and that's the punishment that we deserve. Now, we've already covered, sometimes it's a good thing, but guilt is only ever as good as it helps you to never go where you didn't like where it took you. That's the only good thing about guilt. Just don't let it be something that you live with forever. But when guilt becomes a life sentence of hard labor without parole, oh, that's not a virtue, is it? It's not good at all. And at its most severe, you can imagine the personal danger that we put ourselves in, because it leads to, like I said before, an adversarial relationship with ourselves, and that voice that constantly reminds us that we have not a right to be happy while ever we're responsible for the hurt that we've given to others. And I hope you can get that into your minds. Sounds like a virtue, but, you know, even people that we put in prison, we trust that at some point they come out, and we want to give them an opportunity to start again. But sometimes the sentence that we put on ourselves from guilt, there is no end to the sentence, and it goes on, and we want that to stop. So it leads to deep self-hatred, and one feels unable to forgive themselves or put the matter right. Now, mistakes are human failings, and we understand that. And it's quite normal for us to make mistakes, but we have got to understand that we don't deserve the consequence of the guilt that we feel. Now, I've already said, but if we live guilt-free, it can appear we're sending a signal that we don't care about the pain we have caused others, and that perhaps we're not really sorry for what we've done. Now, that is the biggest lie ever. Now, you'll say, yes, but I've seen it happen. Maybe. But it is not the truth of coming out of a situation of guilt, because you can say to yourself that I do not want to keep perpetuating the hurt, because that's the issue. It gets continued rather than putting a stop to it. Now, religion has not helped, and I want to be very careful how I say this, but religion hasn't helped because it sort of helps in the sense that it relieves our sort of, hang on, let me find, I've just lost my place. It sort of eases the conscience. And why does it do that? Because we like the idea of someone taking upon themselves, and here I'm talking about Jesus in the context of his death on the cross. We like the idea of someone taking upon themselves our excruciating guilt so we can be free. But there is a very subtle thing going on here, and it's called scapegoating. Because it's like, okay, I know I'm guilty, but somebody needs to pay. Now, it's fine if somebody is going to set me free, but as long as somebody else pays, because the thing has to be paid for. Now, that's a very subtle thing. Why is it that we find scapegoating really easy? Because it works this way. I messed up. Someone will pay, as long as it's not me, but somebody has to pay. We're actually not satisfied with no one paying. That's a biggie, isn't it? And if this is you, it might just help you understand tonight why you're stuck. Because we're not satisfied with no one paying. Might make us feel a little bit better if someone else is paying the price for us. But what it really shows is a foundational problem, that you really believe that there can be no forgiveness or freedom from guilt without payment. And it's such a big lie, and it keeps us so stuck, and you'll never be free for yourself or others if you continue with that mindset. So here we have the issue. How do we deal with guilt? So we learn that the story that we tell ourselves is not helping. We have to change that story. We have got to stop making guilt a priority for our brain to automatically default to. We have to help the brain rewire itself, because it will work with you to create new pathways of understanding and help you dissolve old ones if you will actually just let it. We have to overwhelm the guilt with goodness and kindness and compassion and forgiveness. Remind yourself of what you were proud of and what you're grateful for. And find compassion for the person you were, because that person doesn't exist anymore. And as I said in the last little section, forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you knew it. And live in the now. That's a powerful thing. It's helped me a lot. Living guilty isn't very productive. It doesn't help you to do better. It causes you to struggle more. Guilt will drain you emotionally and physically. It will wear you out. And if you're guilty, you won't be helped to overcome challenges. You won't pursue dreams. You will just be stuck. And if you get to the place of shame, you will actually tell yourself you aren't even capable of changing. And it's a terrible place to be. So we can arise to a new awareness. Now, Russell Brand said something which I really found interesting coming from Russell Brand. He talked about there has to be a spiritual solution. Now, I sometimes worry about things like that because it seems about looking external. It's like there has to be a spiritual solution to this problem. And I agree with him. But it's not something that you look at externally for an intervention. What you do is you look internally for an intervention because you are a spiritual being. And what we talked last week about the Braveheart clip, where they were being encouraged to come out of their discomfort in order to be able to change the future. They were primarily Scotsmen. They were first and foremost Scotsmen, and then secondarily, they were oppressed and enslaved by the English. But knowing who they were caused them to rally to a new story, and they were even to the point of them willing to die for it. That is the point here. When we talk about a spiritual solution, the spiritual solution is you. You are I am. Just as God is I am. Matter and spirit coming together, which means that the spiritual intervention is you knowing who you are made to be. And just like Russell Brand said, you are beautiful. There is no unredeemable mistake that can stop you returning home. And I thought that's an amazing thing. Why is it that we feel that there is no return home? So take the stick, learn from it, and make your way home. Because here's the point, the Lion King clip. His whole group of people were languishing and dying because they didn't have their leader. And their leader went back to them, and they were able to turn it all around, and there was health and life in the Pride Lands once again. So I hope I can encourage you tonight to say goodbye to guilt. Tell yourself a new story and rise up to a new experience of life. And if anybody just wants to close their eyes and says, right, from today, I'm going to start releasing myself from the life sentence of guilt that leads to shame. So I'm just going to ask, if you want to just shut your eyes for a minute and just have one little second of reflection and say, is this for me? And I trust that from this moment on, you will find freedom from your guilt and rise up in an incredible newness of life. Thank you. I'm going to end with, this is me. Come on. Not going to hide or run away.